Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. In 1961, outgoing Republican President Dwight Eisenhower delivered his farewell address to the nation, as all presidents do. But as a former World War II general and the outgoing commander-in-chief, his included quite a prescient warning.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted.
I think it's fair to say history has since vindicated Eisenhower. But at the time, this warning shocked people. The so-called military-industrial complex spent the following 6 days consolidating power and influence in Washington to an extent that is, I think, genuinely damaging both to our democracy and our foreign policy. Well, last night, President Joe Biden delivered a farewell address of his own, and in an explicit nod to Eisenhower, offered a scorching warning about the new concentration of power we are seeing unfold before our eyes.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well.
I got to say, it was genuinely wild to hear Joe Biden describe an oligarchy from the Oval Office. It's a word that Bernie Sanders has been using for decades. It's the type of thing you usually hear from the mouths of folks, I would say, further to the left than Joe Biden. And in short, it just means rule by a very, very small group of very, very wealthy folks. As journalist Brian Stelter notes, searches for the term spiked last night. The Associated Press even published an explainer of what exactly oligarchy is. And it's just not a word you hear applied very often in this country, at least not by the nation's most powerful politicians. I think Americans, when they do think about oligarchs, tend to think about what has emerged in the post-Soviet states like Russia, where leaders are surrounded by a handful of obscenely wealthy men who effectively control entire industries, act with total impunity, with the explicit or implicit permission of the actual government. These kinds of governments, basically without exception, make lives miserable for their citizens because they destroy the mechanisms of democratic feedback that allow for flourishing nations. They concentrate power, which in turn leads to abuses of power, as President Biden warned last night. It's that very concentration of power, in fact, that many of the most influential framers of our Constitution most feared. In Federalist 47, James Madison warned, the accumulation of all powers in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Well, Donald Trump very clearly, explicitly, constantly says this, wants to concentrate all the power around him. And his billionaire tech bro buddies appear to be down with this plan as long as they get to be in the inner circle. I think they want to be American oligarchs. This week, we got word that Apple CEO Tim Cook will join the ranks of the billionaires at Trump's inauguration. This isn't just like, oh, it's great, peaceful transfer of power. Like, they're showing up. When you show up to an inauguration, you're like, yeah, that's my dude, okay? He's going to be there along with Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Meta's Mark Zuckerberg and OpenAI's Sam Altman, among others. Elon Musk, naturally, will be at the inauguration as well. He won't be getting sworn in, but he is basically already operating as Trump's co-president with his own independent authority. And this is not like some meme. I mean, he's calling the shots with congressional budget negotiators. He'll be working within the White House complex. Apparently, he's already running off the books prisoner swap negotiations with Iran. To be clear, in my humble view, a handful of unelected tech billionaires should not be running the country just because they're giving lots of money to Donald Trump and fawning over him. And all this might seem abstract now, like who really cares? There's lots of rich people who influence American policy, true. Lots of rich donors, true. But there are many things these men, and they are all men, want from this government. The process of governing, of democratic governance, is about managing the conflict endemic to human affairs. And in managing that conflict, it is about prioritizing competing interests between different people, different groups of people, different factions. And when it comes down to a scenario where there is a competing interest between what's good for Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk and what's good for you, who do you think is going to win that fight? Today, in an exclusive interview with Lawrence O'Donnell, President Biden reiterated how fearful he is for the future of American democracy.
When you got up from that desk last night, that was really the final big public moment in a 50-year political career. Yeah, that's how long it was. You've served in government longer than any person who's ever served in this job. What did that feel like at the end of that speech? We were pushed out of the room as people were surrounding you, hugging you, and as that emotion was filling the room. But was there a sense of the release of a burden getting up from that desk?
No, but there was a sense that of serious concern. You've known me a long time. I really am concerned about how fragile democracy is. That sounds corny, but I mean, I really am concerned because you've heard me say it 100 times. I really think we're at an inflection point in history here. We're unrelated to any particular leader. Things are going to change drastically.
You can catch the rest of the interview on The Last Word tonight at 10 p.m. Congressman Jamie Raskin's a Democrat of Maryland. He's the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, and he joins me now. They didn't have tech billionaires in the Founders Day, but they had their own versions. And, you know, Madison is really pretty clear on this, that this is kind of a nightmare scenario. Concentrated power in the hands of a few, you know, without the sort of checks and balances, without particularly the primacy of Congress. The vision here is almost the opposite, I think it's fair to say, of what the founders were thinking about.
Well, Madison, of course, was writing about the separation of powers and how you didn't want all political power to be channeled either in the legislative branch, the lawmaking, or the executive or the judicial. Much less did the founders want all of the power to reside somewhere else and have a huge conglomerate monopoly economic force control the whole government, all three branches of government. And so that's why, you know, Jefferson wanted an anti-monopoly provision in the Constitution, but the whole anti-monopoly, antitrust politics of our history has been a dominant strain of pro-democratic thought.
There was something else that happened today that relates to what's happening in Congress, where, again, the theme here of, like, consolidation of power. Mike Turner, chair of the House Intelligence Committee, right? This is a guy who's a rock-ribbed Republican. He basically got fired by the president. He was replaced as the chairman. I think he was kicked off the committee. He's going to be replaced by Mike Johnson. And when asked about it, he said it came from Mar-a-Lago. It seems pretty clear that Trump fired him. I've never quite heard of something like this. Honestly, I mean, usually committee fiefdoms are so powerful and such a sort of enduring source of congressional Article I independence. I'm pretty struck by this.
Well, none of the autocrats want him. The autocrats in Mar-a-Lago don't want him. The autocrats in Moscow don't want him. Look, he's been pro-Ukraine. He's voted with the Democrats for aid to Ukraine. He was a great mayor of Dayton who had a real bipartisan history and base of support. And after the terrible gun violence that took place in Dayton, he came out for an assault weapon ban. He's someone who's extremely popular with Democrats. And who knows what's going to happen at this point. But that's a terrible affront and indignity to a guy who had at least one more term as chair of the Intelligence Committee. And to have the Republican Party just turn their backs on him like that and disown him is a major rupture in the political fabric of the House of Representatives. It'll be very interesting to see what happens now because he has a lot of friends on the Democratic side of the aisle.